In the sleek, glass-walled boardroom of Pinnacle Ventures, a private equity firm perched on the 45th floor of a Chicago skyscraper, the air smelled of ambition and espresso. It was a late Thursday afternoon, and the city's skyline glittered under a fading September sun. Marcus Langston, the firm's charismatic CEO, leaned back in his ergonomic chair, swirling a glass of aged whiskey. Around him, his inner circle, 3 colleagues he'd known since their Ivy League days, lounged in tailored suits, their laughter echoing off the polished mahogany table. They were planning Marcus's annual gala, a lavish affair held at his Lake Michigan estate, known for its guest list of tech moguls, politicians, and minor celebrities. "Okay, picture this," Marcus said, a sly grin spreading across his face. "We send an invite to Clara Hensley. You know, the barista from the lobby cafe? Imagine her showing up to the gala in her little apron, holding a tray of lattes." The room erupted in laughter. Ethan Caldwell, Marcus's CFO and oldest friend, nearly choked on his drink. "Genius," he gasped. "She'll think it's real and show up all flustered. It'll be the highlight of the night." Clara Hensley was the quiet, unassuming woman who worked the morning shift at Brew and Bloom, the artisanal coffee shop in the building's lobby. To Marcus and his crew, she was a background figure, someone who blended into the hum of their daily routine, her name barely registered unless a cappuccino was late. The idea of inviting her to the gala, a black tie event dripping with exclusivity, was a private joke, a way to amuse themselves at the expense of someone they deemed beneath their world. "I'll have the invite hand-delivered to the cafe," Marcus said, smirking. "Gold foil, the works. Let's see if she bites." What they didn't know was that Clara, wiping down the espresso machine that evening, had overheard their conversation. The boardroom's glass walls weren't as soundproof as Marcus assumed, and her shift had extended late to cover for a sick coworker. She stood frozen, a rag in her hand, as their words drifted through the slightly ajar door. "She's not coming," Ethan had scoffed. "People like her don't step into our world." Clara's jaw tightened, but she didn't react. She finished her shift, locked up the cafe, and walked home to her small apartment in Pilsen, the invitation already forming an idea in her mind. Clara wasn't a stranger to being underestimated. Raised by a single mother in a working-class neighborhood, she'd learned early to navigate spaces where she wasn't expected to thrive. She'd put herself through community college, studying art history while working odd jobs, and landed the barista gig to save for a master's degree. The cafe job was temporary, a means to an end, but to Marcus and his friends, it defined her. The invitation, when it arrived the next morning, gold embossed, sealed with wax, and addressed to Ms. Clara Hensley, was meant to mock her. But Clara saw something else, an opportunity. She didn't cry or rage. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table, the invite glowing under the dim light of a thrift store lamp. Her cat, Matisse, curled up beside her as she traced the elegant script with her finger. "They think I'll crumble," she murmured. "They think I don't belong." But Clara had spent years proving people wrong, teachers who said she'd never leave the neighborhood, bosses who overlooked her for promotions. This was just another challenge, and she wasn't about to back down. The next day, Clara called in a favor. Her friend Lena, a stylist who worked at a boutique salon in Wicker Park, owed her one after Clara had helped her study for her licensing exam. "I need to look like I own the room," Clara told her over the phone. Lena laughed, delighted. "Oh, girl, we're going to make them forget how to blink." Clara also visited a vintage shop in Andersonville, where she found a crimson gown with a fitted bodice and a flowing train. It wasn't flashy, but it was striking and timeless, like a painting come to life. She tried it on, stood in front of the mirror, and felt a quiet power settle into her bones. This wasn't about fitting in, it was about redefining the room. By Friday, the gala preparations were in full swing. Marcus's estate was a vision of opulence, crystal chandeliers, imported orchids, and a string quartet tuning up in the garden. The guest list, curated by Marcus's assistant, Priya, included 180 names, venture capitalists, city officials, and a few social media influencers to keep things trendy. Priya raised an eyebrow when she saw Clara's name on the list. "The barista?" she asked Marcus, who was signing off on the catering menu. "Just a bit of fun," he replied, waving it off. "She won't show." Priya hesitated, then entered the name, her fingers lingering on the keyboard. She'd seen Clara in the cafe, always polite, always composed. Something about the prank didn't sit right, but she said nothing. Marcus's inner circle was buzzing with anticipation. At a pre-gala dinner, Ethan brought it up again. What if she actually shows? He asked, grinning. She'll probably bring a thermos of coffee. The table laughed, but Priya, who'd been invited as Ethan's plus one, stayed quiet. She'd grown up in a family that scraped by, and she knew what it felt like to be the punchline. She made a mental note to keep an eye on Clara if she appeared. Clara, meanwhile, was preparing. She spent Saturday morning at Lena's salon, where her dark curls were swept into an elegant updo, accented with a single pearl pin. She practiced her walk in the gown, not because she needed to, but because she wanted every step to feel like a statement. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "You don't ask for a seat at the table, you take it." By 6 p.m., Clara was ready. She called her rideshare, slipped into her heels, and headed to the estate. The prank was about to backfire, and Marcus Langston had no idea what was coming. The Langston estate glowed like a beacon against the Lake Michigan shoreline, its sprawling lawn dotted with fairy lights and white-gloved valets. Guests arrived in sleek cars, their gowns and tuxedos catching the flash of photographers' cameras. Inside, the ballroom was a masterpiece of excess, gold-rimmed glassware, a champagne fountain, and a custom ice sculpture of Pinnacle Ventures' logo. Marcus moved through the crowd, shaking hands, his smile as polished as the marble floors. He was in his element, the king of his own curated kingdom, unaware that the evening was about to shift. Clara stepped out of her rideshare at 7:15 p.m., her crimson gown catching the light like a flame. The valet, a young man named Javier, offered his hand, but she smiled and declined, her steps steady on the gravel path. The hostess at the entrance, a woman in a crisp black uniform, checked her tablet. "Name?" she asked, her tone neutral. "Clara Hensley," Clara replied, her voice calm but firm. The hostess blinked, scanned the list again, and nodded. "Welcome, Miss Hensley. Right this way." The crowd parted as Clara entered the ballroom, not because they knew her, but because her presence demanded it. The gown hugged her frame, its deep red hue vibrant against the muted tones of the room. Her posture was regal, her chin lifted, her eyes scanning the space with quiet confidence. Conversations faltered. A woman in a sequin dress whispered to her companion, "Who is she?" Her companion shrugged, unable to place her. The string quartet's music seemed to soften, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Marcus was near the bar, regaling a group of investors with a story about his latest deal, when Ethan nudged him. "You're not gonna believe this," he muttered, nodding toward the entrance. Marcus turned, and for a moment, his smile froze. Clara wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be a name on a list, a joke shared over whiskey. But there she was, moving through the room like she'd been invited to every gala in the city. "Well, damn," Marcus said under his breath, forcing a grin. She actually showed. Clara didn't seek him out. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, thanking him with a warmth that made him pause, then smile. She moved toward a cluster of guests near a floral display, her steps deliberate, her expression serene. A tech entrepreneur named Vivian Chen, known for her sharp wit and sharper investments, approached her. "That gown is stunning," Vivian said, her tone genuine. "Where did you find it?" Clara smiled. "A little shop in Andersonville. It spoke to me." Vivian raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You've got an eye for art." The conversation flowed effortlessly. Clara spoke about color palettes and design, drawing on her art history studies, and Vivian listened, nodding thoughtfully. Others joined, drawn by Clara's quiet magnetism. She didn't boast or over-explain, she simply was. Across the room, Marcus watched, his jaw tightening. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be awkward, out of place, a fleeting amusement. Instead, she was holding court, and he was starting to feel like the guest at his own party. Priya, standing nearby, caught Clara's eye and gave her a small nod. She'd seen the guest list, knew the prank, and admired Clara's poise. "You're handling this like a pro," she whispered when she got a chance to pass by. Clara's lips curved. "I've had practice." Priya didn't ask what she meant, but she understood. Some battles were fought silently, with nothing but dignity as a weapon. Marcus tried to regain control. He grabbed a microphone from the band's setup and tapped it, the sound cutting through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming, "welcome to the night of the year." The crowd clapped, but their eyes kept drifting to Clara. "Tonight's about celebration, success, and the unexpected," he said, his gaze flicking to her. "Sometimes, life surprises us with guests who shake things up." A few guests chuckled, sensing the subtext, but Clara didn't flinch. She raised her glass slightly, her expression unreadable, and the room's attention stayed on her. The whispers grew. "Is she an artist?" someone asked. "Maybe a designer," another guessed. No one pegged her as the barista, and Clara didn't correct them. She moved to a table where a city councilwoman, Elena Torres, was seated. "You look like you belong here," Elena said, half joking. Clara met her gaze. "I'm here because I was invited." "That's enough." Elena laughed, impressed. "Fair enough. Tell me about yourself." Clara shared pieces of her story, not the full weight of it, but enough to paint a picture. She talked about her love for art, her studies, her dreams of curating exhibits that told stories of overlooked communities. The table listened, captivated, not because she was trying to impress, but because her authenticity was undeniable. Marcus, watching from afar, felt the room slipping away. He signaled to the staff to bring out the caviar and dim the lights for a drone show outside, hoping to pull focus back to his spectacle. But the energy had shifted, and Clara was at its center. As the evening progressed, the gala's carefully orchestrated glamour began to feel secondary to Clara's presence. Guests gravitated toward her, drawn by her calm authority and the way she spoke with purpose, not performance. She didn't name-drop or posture, she listened, asked questions, and offered insights that made people pause. A venture capitalist named Raj Patel asked her opinion on public art installations, and her response, tying accessibility to cultural impact, sparked a lively debate among the group. Even the influencers, usually glued to their phones, put them down to listen. Marcus, meanwhile, was unraveling. He'd spent years building an image of effortless control, but Clara's arrival had cracked it. He tried to laugh it off, joking with Ethan about the barista stealing the show, but his voice was tight. Ethan, sensing his friend's discomfort, suggested they double down. "Let's make it fun," he whispered. "Get her to talk about her job. That'll remind everyone who she is." Marcus nodded, seizing the chance to reclaim the narrative. He approached Clara's table, where she was now seated with Raj, Elena, and a few others. "Clara, right," he said, his tone overly warm. "Why don't you tell everyone what you do? I'm sure it's fascinating." The table went quiet, sensing the edge in his voice. Clara met his eyes, unflinching. "I'm a barista at Brew and Bloom," she said simply. "I make coffee, keep the place running, and talk to people all day. It's honest work." Her tone was steady, without a hint. "Lorem ipsum dolor sit consecteter adipissing illit, sed du ius mod temper incident ut laborati dolor magna aliqua. Ut enim ad minum venium, cas nostrud exercitation alamco laboris nisi ut aliquip exie commodo consequat. Duis aut ire dolor in reprehenderit in voluptate velit esse silum dolor eu fugiad nulla parieter. Exceptor sint accicat cupiditat non proident, sunt in culpa ca officia desirunt mallet anim id est laborum of shame." The table nodded, some visibly surprised, others impressed by her candor. Marcus pressed on, his smile thinning. "Must be tough, pouring coffee for folks like us. Ever think about doing something bigger?" The jab was subtle, but clear. Clara tilted her head, her expression serene. "Big isn't always better, Marcus. Sometimes it's about doing what matters, not what impresses." The table erupted in soft laughter, not at her, but with her. Marcus's face reddened, and he excused himself, muttering about checking on the catering. The room continued to orbit Clara. A young artist named Jamal, invited as a token up-and-comer, approached her to share his portfolio. Clara listened intently, offering feedback that was both kind and incisive. "You're not just talented," she told him. "You're telling a story. Keep going." Jamal beamed, later telling Priya, she gets it. She sees people. Priya, who'd been watching Clara all night, felt a pang of pride. She'd underestimated her too, but now she saw the strength in Clara's quiet defiance. As dessert was served, lavender macarons and gold-dusted truffles, the conversations grew warmer, more genuine. Clara's table became the heart of the room, a space where pretension melted away. Even the string quartet seemed to play with more soul, as if inspired by the shift in the air. Marcus, standing by the bar, noticed the change and hated it. He'd planned this night to cement his status, not to watch a barista steal his spotlight. He grabbed the microphone again, determined to take back control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "let's raise a glass to ambition, to building empires, and to knowing your place in them." The last phrase hung heavy, a veiled dig at Clara. Some guests clapped, but others exchanged glances, sensing the pettiness. Clara raised her glass, her eyes locked on Marcus, and smiled. It wasn't a challenge, it was a statement. She knew her place, and it was right here, commanding the room. The gala was winding down, the crowd thinning as guests began to drift toward the coat check. Clara stood on the terrace, the lake breeze cool against her skin, reflecting on the night. She hadn't come to prove anything to Marcus or his friends, she'd come for herself, to show that no one could define her worth. But the evening had given her something unexpected: connections, respect, and a spark of possibility. Inside, Marcus was still reeling. He'd tried every trick: more champagne, a louder band, a flashy drone show, but the night belonged to Clara. As he stood by the dessert table, nursing a whiskey, Priya approached him. "She's incredible," she said, her tone neutral but pointed. "You misjudged her." Marcus scoffed. "She's a barista, Priya." This was a fluke. Priya shook her head. "You invited her to laugh. She came to teach you something." Before Marcus could respond, Vivian Chen, the tech entrepreneur, approached Clara on the terrace. "I've been thinking," Vivian said, her eyes bright. "Your ideas about art and community, they're fresh. I'm funding a new cultural initiative in Chicago, and I want you on the advisory board." "Paid, of course." Clara blinked, caught off guard. "I'm not. I don't have a fancy degree or connections." Vivian waved a hand. "You have vision. That's rarer." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "I'd be honored." As Vivian walked away, Clara felt a weight lift. This wasn't just about one night, it was about what came next. She returned to the ballroom for the final toast, led by Ethan, who was oblivious to the shift in the room's dynamics. "To Marcus," he said, raising his glass, "and to surprises that keep us on our toes." The crowd laughed, but their eyes were on Clara, who raised her glass with a quiet smile. Then came the twist. As the guests began to leave, a man in a sharp suit approached Clara. He introduced himself as David Okoye, a curator for a prestigious Chicago art museum. "I overheard you talking about public art," he said. "I've been looking for someone to lead a new exhibit on local voices. I think you're the one." Clara's heart raced. She dreamed of working in art curation, but never imagined it would happen like this. "Why me?" she asked. David smiled. "Because you walked into a room that tried to diminish you and made it yours. That's the kind of curator we need." Clara accepted, and as she left the estate, she felt the weight of the night settle into something new: purpose. Back at Pinnacle Ventures, Marcus would later learn that Clara had been hired by the museum and was advising Vivian's initiative. His prank had backfired, not just by making Clara the star of his gala, but by launching her into a world he'd never anticipated. She didn't just silence the room, she reshaped it, and in doing so, reshaped her future. The next morning, as Clara poured coffee at Brew and Bloom, she smiled to herself. The gala was over, but her story was just beginning. Marcus, meanwhile, sat in his office, staring at the skyline. For the first time, he wondered if he'd been playing the wrong game all along.